You didn't ghost them out of nowhere. You thought about it for a long time, and then one day, quietly, you just stopped. And the most confusing part? You felt free. You looked at their name on the screen, and something inside you just didn't move. No urgency, no guilt. You simply let it ring. The world kept turning. The sky didn't fall. But something had shifted in you permanently, and you could feel it, even if you couldn't name it yet. Your bed felt lighter. The air in the room felt different. Around you, the memories of people floated upward and dissolved, and for the first time in years, you could finally breathe. People started to notice. They said you had changed. They looked at the empty space around you and called it a problem, but you knew something they didn't. You looked in the mirror and saw two versions of yourself. The calm one, standing here today, and the anxious, people-pleasing one who used to do anything just to keep the peace. You used to sit at the center of everyone's chaos. You absorbed it all without being asked. Their anxiety, their drama, their pain. You made it your full-time job to hold other people together. You were the one they called at 2 a.m, and you always answered, every single time, no matter what it quietly cost you. You were the sponge. You soaked up everything around you until you were so heavy with other people's weight that you forgot what it felt like to be light again. And then one day, the phone rang. You saw the name. You looked at it for a long moment, and you didn't pick up. And that was the beginning of everything changing. Your body had been keeping score long before your mind caught up. Your nervous system remembered every time you gave and got nothing back, every time you showed up and were quietly taken for granted. You started closing doors, not dramatically, not with speeches or arguments, just quietly, one by one, until the hallway of your life grew still, and you realized the silence felt like relief. You had been absorbing waves of other people's needs for so long, and the day you finally planted your feet and let the wave dissolve before it reached you, something ancient in you exhaled. Long before you were an adult making these choices, you were a child on a staircase learning to read a room before anyone taught you how to read a book. You learned what kind of night it would be from the sound of footsteps, from the set of a jaw, from a silence that felt different from other silences. You became an expert at sensing danger before it arrived. You found the quiet places, the corners, the small spaces where the storm above couldn't quite reach you. You learned early that solitude was sometimes the only safe shelter available to you. Someone reached toward you, and part of you wanted to reach back, but another part, older and more careful, remembered what reaching had cost before. So you stood at the line and waited. You drew a circle around yourself, not to trap yourself inside it, but to understand what was worth protecting. And standing inside that circle for the first time, you felt the difference between isolation and sanctuary. You had been taking notes on people your entire life without realizing it. The patterns, the cycles, the way certain behaviors repeated themselves with different faces. You had years and years of data. You saw the cycle before it completed. You recognized the pattern before the other person had finished running it. That was not paranoia. That was memory doing exactly its job. Your brain had been quietly rewired by experience. The parts responsible for reading people, detecting inconsistency, sensing when something was off, those parts had been running overtime for years without rest. Now you stood at a crossroads, one path crowded and loud and full of hands reaching for pieces of you, the other quiet, uncertain, but entirely your own, and you were finally ready to choose. You held a stone in your hands and asked yourself the honest question, was this a wall built from fear or a boundary built from knowing? the answer to that question changes everything. One version of you hides behind a wall so high that even the good people cannot reach you. Another version stands at a gate held open with discernment. The difference between those two is everything. You had spent years connected to so many people by thin, invisible threads, and one by one, with care and with certainty, you began to release the ones that were only taking from you. You sat alone at a table set for many, and instead of feeling the absence of people, you felt something unexpected, a quiet that tasted like peace instead of emptiness. You had stood in crowded rooms your entire life and felt completely invisible, surrounded by noise and still somehow utterly alone. That kind of loneliness is the kind no one ever warns you about. And then one morning you walked out and your stride felt different, not heavier, lighter, like you had finally put down something you didn't even realize you had been carrying all this time. You sat in the quiet of your own space and heard something you had not heard in a very long time. Your own thoughts, uninterrupted. Your own voice, clear and unhurried. Just yourself. You looked back at the younger version of you, the one who had learned all these survival strategies out of pure necessity, and you placed your hand gently against the glass and said, "I understand now. You did what you had to do." And somewhere out there, not crowding you, not demanding anything, were the people who were meant to find you, the ones who would sit nearby without needing anything from you, the right ones. They exist. You stood at the door with your hand on the frame. The outside looked different now, not threatening, just open. And you realized you didn't have to close it completely. You just had to choose carefully who you let through. You stood at the edge of something vast and understood for the first time that choosing yourself, truly and completely choosing yourself, is one of the quietest, fiercest things a human being can ever do. Your circle was now small, but what was inside it was real. The people who remained leaned toward you naturally, without effort, without conditions attached. And that is not a small thing. That is genuinely everything. The next chapter of your life was a blank page, and for once the blankness didn't frighten you. It felt like possibility, like a story finally being written by the right person, by you. The rain fell all around you, but somehow you stayed dry. Not because you were untouchable, but because you had finally learned to protect the space you occupied, and that protection was entirely yours. You placed your hand over your own chest and felt your heartbeat, steady, present, alive, and you remembered that this energy, this life inside you, is not infinite. It deserves to go to the right places. You looked forward, not performing, not explaining, not shrinking, just present in your own skin, in your own quiet, completely unbothered way. And for the first time, that felt exactly enough. You stood beside something ancient and rooted and realized you had become that too. Someone whose roots went deep, someone who had been through every storm and was still standing in the same ground. You sat quietly watching the rain against the glass, and you understood something new. Peace is not the absence of people. Peace is the presence of the right conditions, and you were finally learning to create them. You stood before the open cage and felt no grief. What had left was meant to leave. What remained was chosen, and there is a profound difference between losing someone and releasing them. You watched the sand fall and understood that time had been your greatest teacher. Not the painful moments themselves, but the pattern they revealed. Every grain that fell had shown you something true. You looked at the scale and made your choice without hesitation. Your peace on one side, everything that disrupted it on the other. And for the first time, the choice was simple. You walked through the reaching hands and you didn't stop.
Not because you were cold, but because you finally knew the difference between someone reaching for you and someone reaching for what you could give them. You looked down at the compass and felt something settle in your chest. You didn't need anyone else to tell you which direction was right for you. You already knew. You had always known. You lay beneath the vast sky and felt something release in you. You were not too small. You were not too broken. You were exactly the right size for the life you were quietly building. You looked out at the open water and understood that you didn't need a destination yet. The boat was yours. The current was yours. The direction would come when you were ready for it. You reached back and unclipped the weight you had been carrying for years, and as it dropped from your shoulders, you stood taller than you had in a long time, not because the world had changed,